Today I want to talk about Micah Bowens, Jon Finley, and McDonald's bags filled with cash. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, start with some news. Oklahoma has hired Jon Finley to take over as associate head coach for offense, overseeing tight ends and the like at Oklahoma. This is after a year as the passing game coordinator at Ole Miss, where all Ole Miss did was score more points on the national champion Alabama Crimson Tide than anybody else had in any game. Many of you know Jon as a 2008 graduate at Oklahoma, my dad's favorite tight end ever, and that is including Jermaine Gresham and Mark Andrews in that conversation. I'm excited for what Jon can add to the offense. I'm excited that he's getting to come back home to coach and continue his, outstanding career as a coach, particularly working with this group of tight ends where you have dudes, right? You got Austin Stogner, Braden Willis, Mikey Henderson, if that's where he stays, and I mentioned Braden Willis. I'm already got that dude on my brain. Jalen Conyer, of course, has transferred to Arizona State, and you ought to be pretty good about recruiting tight ends even more in the future, because that was one of the things that Shane Beamer oversaw and was really good with. And you have tremendous ties to local recruiting talent, as there are dudes my age that will remember Jon, and I'm sure there are uncles and even some sons that remember Jon playing at Oklahoma. So good hire for Lincoln Riley, whose staff continues to just be filled with all-stars. DeMarco Murray, your running backs coach. Cale Gundy, your inside receivers coach. Bill Bedenbaugh with the offensive line. Retaining Dennis Simmons as outside receiver coach, the best in the country at that job. And really developing talent. Now, what I find to be interesting about what's going on at Oklahoma also is adding Micah Bowens as a transfer from Penn State. This is 2020 quarterback out of Bishop Gorman in Vegas. Dude can spin it. There's a reason why he was at Penn State. Just a 3-star recruit according to the 247 Sports Composite, but he has all the tools that you need to be successful at a high major Power 5 level. Also fills that quarterback spot left vacant by Chandler Morris, who decided to transfer back home to Texas Christian. Remember, he played his high school football at Highland Park. Makes a lot of sense. Could be the heir apparent to Max Duggan, as they've been trying to figure out a dude to really come in, pick up where he left off. Texas Christian has been golden when they've had outstanding quarterback play, going back to Trayvon Boykin. Some of y'all even remember Casey Paul Hall. But I really believe that Chandler Morris is going to be in a very good position in the next couple of years to start at quarterback for what I expect to be a top 25 Texas Christian team that's always going to be stout defensively, and you're probably going to play against 1 or 2 first-round draft picks in that secondary defensive liner in that linebacking core. So that is tremendous for Lincoln Riley to just be able to go pluck a dude that went into the portal, almost a couple weeks ago, right? And for James Franklin to be losing a guy like that, I don't know that that's really going to set them back, because I think you like what you saw out of Will Levis. But simply put, Oklahoma has been quarterback U. If there is such a thing, there's some debate about whether or not there actually is a quarterback U when you look at how those guys actually produce in the NFL and how hard it is to be a great quarterback in the NFL. But count the Heisman trophies, right? Count the number 1 overall draft picks. Count the freshman All-Americans at quarterback. And you can see how Riley is developing Spencer Rattler into another first-round quarterback. Remember, this was the knock on Lincoln Riley. He hadn't developed one of his own out of high school. He'd always gone into the portal to get one, or one had already been there, like Baker Mayfield, who had transferred in from Texas Tech. I think he's quietly going to put that to bed, especially this year, as I expect Oklahoma to go on a national championship run. All right, so Dan Patrick got on the radio and said he had a source that told him that the Tennessee coaching staff was putting money in brown McDonald's paper bags and handing out Happy Meals full of cash. That is a salacious detail, and if it is true, that's taking it all the way back to the 70s when we got like Bill Yeoman or whomever. Like there's a head coach at Houston who was handing out envelopes that were full of cash at Houston. And then you got coaches at SMU that, of course, were doing very much the same thing, and they had a payroll to meet. So it's been a very long time since we got to make jokes about impermissible benefits in the form of cash, although I know that there are a bunch of comments all the time about bagmen when we get these great recruiting classes. I think it's just fun. I think it's funny. I think it's salacious. I don't think it's the kind of thing that most people will report, but also, he's on the radio, and I understand that, having been on the radio. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this, and I want to make sure I pull this up and I get this correct, because David Ubben got some language that was in the termination letter for Jeremy Pruitt that might actually speak to some of this. And here's the tweet. Tennessee, in its termination letter to Jeremy Pruitt, quote, "Your failures are likely to lead to significant penalties to the university and has jeopardized the eligibility of our student athletes." Yikes, that is strong language. And it's been quite a while since we've seen a head coach fired for cause. You're used to buyouts being just part of it. You're willing to buy that guy out so you can find somebody else that's going to be a little bit different and maybe do the same thing. But now Tennessee is heading into a fifth coaching search in 12 years. They have not been relevant for damn near 25. Like, we got to take it back to the 20th century for the last time that Tennessee won a conference championship. I think they've won like 2 in the last 30 years. I'm going to check on that because I'm sure somebody's going to check on this because I'm saying it off the top of my head rather than writing it down first, which is a thing that I need to work on. So let's go ahead and make sure that we got the conference championships down here because we can do that with the laptop and the Wikipedia page, going to the sports conference or sports reference page because I love sports reference. Cool. So, yeah, man, we're looking at 96, 98 in 2001, 2003, 2004, 2007 for division titles. So they won a division title in 2007, which is the last time they were actually able to beat Alabama as well. And then you look at conference titles, dude, 13 in the SEC. All right. So not nearly as bad as Texas, but I think that's sort of the comp, right? Is they're a sleeping giant. If Tennessee ever gets it figured out, it's going to be tough for the rest of us to try to keep up. There you go. 97, 98, 99. Okay, way more than 3. So I'm glad I fact-checked that. So from 89 to 98, you have 4 conference championships, Johnny Majors and Phil Fulmer, head coaches of those squads, but no conference championship since 98 and no division title since 2007. Fulmer tried to come in there and be the AD after running John Curry off, after John Curry had Mike Leach on the hook, ready to go to Tennessee. No. Greg Schiano wanted to be a head coach of Tennessee. They picketed. I think Billy Napier's name has come up the most here recently, but it might be one of those things where it's a complete tear down and build up. So you might want a 5-6 year contract just to make sure you get enough time to actually go through every nook and cranny of volunteer football and figure out what to do next, because they've been this bad for so long and it seems like they only got worse. And to go along with these recruiting violations, Jeremy Pruitt wasn't even winning games, like 16 and 19, and then had the nerve to tell us all that he was closing the gap on Alabama after losing by 20. Like that's not going to cut it in Knoxville. That's not going to cut it in the SEC. That's not going to cut it nationally. But with the resources that Tennessee has, with the Haslam brothers being there, or the Haslam family being there, Peyton Manning's apparently going to be a part of the search to find the next Volunteers head coach. They ought to be able to hit this one out of the park. But when I read about how the Auburn search finally went down, knowing that Bo Jackson was a part of it, and that's how they end up settling on Brian Harsin, while also trying to physically push another dude into the job, this is going to get hairy, and I don't expect this one to get done soon. Kevin Steele is the man in charge right now. It might be the man in charge by the time we get to kickoff, and that might end up being the dude depending on how the season goes for Tennessee. So I'm going to be paying attention to it, but I want to cover all 3 of those topics in one upload so that we kind of sort of get caught up. All right, that is it for me. Deuces.